Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Stephanie Bree, and as the headline suggests, today I'm talking about my time working in the pizza business. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like working for different pizzerias and my experience. I dropped out of high school, and in 1999, 2000, I think it was 2000, I dropped out of high school right before I turned 18. And I got a job working at a restaurant at the casino, and I did that for a few months. And then I went and worked at a gas station for a few months, and then I went and worked at a Kmart for a few months. None of these jobs lasted for longer than a couple of months, and then I got a job that did last for a little while. My first job that lasted for a while was when I went to work at Pizza Hut. I had just turned 20 years old. I was dating this girl. Her name was Rose Peterson. She was a college student. She was a couple years older than me. She was a few years older than me, actually. She was 23 at the time. I had just turned 20. And I started working at Pizza Hut. So this was my first job working as a pizza delivery driver. And I started working at the pizza. This was the first pizza place I started to work at. I started out as a delivery driver, and at first, all I did was deliveries. And, as a delivery driver working in a Pizza Hut, you also do prep work. This Pizza Hut, this was back in the 90s, or 2000s. I know it was 2002. This was back when they still had full-on restaurants, before they became delivery-only places. Well, delivery and carry-out only. So we had a full-on restaurant. So part of the job for the delivery driver was to help with the prep work, making the pizzas. The other part of our job was washing dishes. So I was primarily a pizza driver / dishwasher. That was the job I had. Because that was my job, I did know that they did tell us that they paid us a little bit more. They paid pizza drivers a little bit more money than they paid the in-store waitresses and wait staff, but not as much money as the cooks made. Cooks made a little bit more money because the cooks didn't get tips. Delivery drivers and waitresses got tips. So this was my first job. I was driving a Mercury Tracer, 1992 Mercury Tracer. So the car was already 10 years old at the time. And it was a perfect car for delivery driving because it was great gas mileage. It was just a little four-banger. Perfect little car. And then I left the pizza business. I went to work for Sears, and then I did a few odd jobs here and there through temp agencies. I went and worked through temp agencies and did a lot of different random jobs. And then I got a job working at my next pizza delivery job, working for Dominos. So I went to work for Dominos. Dominos was a little bit different than Pizza Hut. So what made Pizza Hut stand out was they had a restaurant. You could actually go in, sit down, and order food, which meant we had a lot of dishes to do. Now, that meant plates and silverware and pizza pans. Lots of dishes. Domino's still had the same setup. The pizza drivers, when they weren't out on the road, when they were in the restaurant, they were supposed to be doing prep work, and then they were supposed to be washing dishes. Domino's does dishes a little bit differently. They cook their pizzas on a little screen, a pizza screen. They just throw the dough on a screen, pat it down, put the toppings on it, throw it in the oven. So they actually don't have pizza pans. Well, they didn't back then. I understand that they have pans now, but they didn't have pizza pans back then. This was 2003, 2004. So it was a little different back then. And I remember we basically had to wash the screens, and then we had to wash the pans that they did have were the square pans that they would cook breadsticks in, the breadstick pans. So we did have breadstick pans. So I would have to cook breadstick pans. So we had screens, but we didn't have delivery, we didn't have dine-in. So we didn't have plates and silverware and things like that. So washing dishes at Domino's was a lot easier. The other thing that was different between Pizza Hut and Domino's, Pizza Hut paid a little bit more. They paid a little bit more on the paycheck. They gave us more money on our paycheck, and Pizza Hut paid a little bit more per delivery. So at the time, the way it worked was Pizza Hut gave us 50 cents per delivery, and if you took 2 deliveries at the same time, you clocked those 2 deliveries, you got $1 for taking 2 deliveries on the same run. Domino's paid you per mile. So if you took 2 or 3 runs at a time, you didn't get paid for all 3 of them. You just got paid for the mileage. So if you had to take 3 runs all at once, you didn't get extra money for it. You just got you got gypped, basically. You got cheated out of your paycheck. Plus, they only paid us, at the time, they paid us 35 cents a mile, which wasn't a lot. Now, this would go up as gas prices would go up and inflation and things like that. So I don't know what they pay today. But Domino's did pay minimum wage. So they did it. They paid minimum wage. That's what they paid delivery drivers. What I remember also being different between Domino's and Pizza Hut was the culture. At Pizza Hut, they wanted pizza drivers in the back. They wanted you washing dishes, doing prep work, running deliveries, and then that was it. They did not want pizza drivers answering the phone. They did not want pizza drivers in the kitchen. They wanted you in the back where you belonged. At Domino's, they only have two jobs at Domino's. See, at Pizza Hut, they had 3 jobs. They had cook. Actually, they had 4 jobs. They had cook, CSR, pizza driver, and then they had the waitresses or the wait staff. Domino's only had 2 jobs, delivery driver and CSR. CSRs were also cooks. They didn't have dedicated cooks at Domino's. They just had, you basically were either a driver or a CSR. CSR stands for customer service representative. So you were either a CSR or you were a driver. If you were a CSR, you answered phones. You made pizzas. That was your job. Pizza drivers were expected to learn how to make pizzas. Pizza drivers were expected to know how to answer phones. So if you had downtime and the CSRs were busy, if they were all on the make line and the phone was ringing, it was your responsibility as a driver to get the phone and get the orders. You couldn't tell the CSRs, hey, the phone's ringing, and jump on the pizza line. Now, you could jump in the pizza line if they asked for help, but if the phone was ringing, it was your responsibility to get off the line and go help answer phones. At Pizza Hut, they had dedicated CSRs who that was their whole job, was answering phone. That was it. That's all they did, was answer phones. Whether it was taking carry-out orders or setting up tables for, dine-in orders, or it was taking orders for delivery. You had 3 options at Pizza Hut. Now, the waitresses were also trained to take orders. Cooks were not. Cooks were told to just stay on the make line at Pizza Hut. Cooks stayed on the make line. Drivers stayed in the back. Drivers weren't even allowed to go out front. We weren't even supposed to be up front. We weren't even supposed to be in the kitchen at all. They brought us our pizzas and put them in a bag, and then they handed us the bag, and then we went out the door. They checked us out. We weren't even supposed to go in the front. Pizza drivers stayed in the back. Domino's, pizza driver come. So at Pizza Hut, you want to go on a run, they give you your run. They give you your bag with all your food in it. You check the ticket. You take if there's you would check the ticket and see if there's soda pops or things like that, and then you would put those in the bag, in a plastic bag, and you would go take your delivery, and you'd come back, and then you would take your money to the register. They would take the money, and then they would put the money in the register, and then give you your tips from the whatever was left over. That was your tip, and you would put it in your tip box, your tip bag, which was a bag that they gave us, we wore like an apron that we wore. Excuse me. So Domino's worked a little bit differently. Domino's, they would check you out. You would sometimes have to cut your own pizzas at Domino's because the kitchen was set up differently. The kitchen was set up to be one efficient room. There was no dine-in, so you didn't have to worry about separating the two. Domino's, they would cut the pizzas, put them in the bag, and put them in the box. It was your responsibility to put them in the bag. They didn't do that for you at Domino's. You had to put them in the bag yourself. You also had to check yourself out on the computer. At Pizza Hut, they checked you. The manager, the supervisor checked you out. You didn't touch the computer at Pizza Hut. At Domino's, you did. Domino's, they had to check. At Pizza Hut, they had to check you out. At Domino's, you checked yourself out. So you had to check out your delivery. You had to go to the computer, assign yourself the run that you were on, take your delivery, get back, check yourself back in, and then you had to go to the front where they would finish the process, where they would take your money. They would take your money and they would log you back in and say, okay, now you're ready for the thing. They would take your tips and they would put them in a box that was designated. It was your designated. It was a lock box that was designated for you. You couldn't get into it until the end of the night. At the end of the night, they would open the box, and then the manager had the keys. They would open the box, give you your tips at the end of the night. So it worked a little bit differently. I also worked at Papa John's and I worked at Little Caesars. Now, Papa John's did things backwards from everybody. I hated working at Papa John's. First thing that they did backwards from everybody is they went sauce, toppings, cheese. Oh my God, I want to bang my head against the wall. Sauce, toppings, cheese. That's so disgusting. I can't eat Papa John's because of that. It's gross. It's just so stinking gross. Everybody else, Little Caesars, Pizza Hut, Domino's, sauce, cheese, toppings. Pizza Hut does another layer of cheese. So Pizza Hut does sauce, cheese, toppings, and then top cheese. Domino's doesn't do top cheese. Little Caesars, from what I remember, Little Caesars doesn't do top cheese either. Okay, caveat, I'm talking about back then. Okay, things may have changed. But I'm saying back then, that's the way it was. Papa John's they didn't hire pizza drivers and CSRs. They just hired staff. Papa John's hired you to be basically you were pizza staff. That's it. They just hired staff. So the way Papa John's worked is you came in, you were a pizza driver, but you also had to do prep work, which is standard, but you also were a CSR. They didn't have dedicated CSRs who just sat in the restaurant. It was the pizza driver's responsibility. They had management. So if all the drivers were out on the road, there was nobody in the store to answer phones except for the manager. There was nobody making pizzas except for the manager. That's very inefficient. And the reason they said they did it that way is because everybody was on the line. That way, everybody worked the line, everybody worked the phones. There was no dedicated, that way. And it worked out. Okay, I said big caveat, if all the pizza drivers were out on the road at the same time, there was nobody in the store. That never happened. I worked there on a weekend, Friday night, Saturday night, weekend, busiest day of the week. Never happened. We had people in that restaurant the whole time. They never sent more than 2 or 3 drivers out at a time. Papa John's does not get as busy as the other two. They don't get anywhere near as busy as the other two. Then there's Little Caesars. Now, I only worked at Papa John's for the one weekend. So only thing I can remember is that they didn't have CSRs. I don't remember if they checked out your runs or if you checked out your own runs. I don't remember. I don't remember how that worked. I don't remember if they had a lockbox or not. I don't remember. I just remember hating it. I remember hating it because it was like I was expected to answer the phones the whole time I was in, if the phone rang. It wasn't just wait for the CSR to get it. It was literally answer the phone. Huh? The only time pizza drivers had to answer the phone at Domino's is if everybody was busy. You very, 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 very rarely had to answer the phones at Pizza Hut. They had enough people whose responsibility was to answer phones at Pizza Hut that if a driver was answering phones, they were swamped. If a driver was answering phones, you weren't getting your pizza for an hour or longer. You were not getting your pizza for a good long while. If the phones were so backed up that the drivers were answering phones. And that wasn't the case at Domino's, but they still had to be backed up at Domino's for drivers to be answering phones. But at Papa John's, drivers answered phones. There were no CSRs. This was a stupid way of running their business. I don't know if they still run it that way or not, but if they do, holy crap, you guys suck. As bad as Papa John's was, they were not the worst. Little Caesars was the worst one I worked at. Now, I worked at Little Caesars when they still did delivery. Now, they stopped doing delivery. I don't know if they went back to doing delivery again or not. I don't know if they do delivery today. But there was a period of time where Little Caesars just stopped doing delivery. They were shutting down stores. Little Caesars was going out of business. A lot of people were expecting Little Caesars that they were finished. I'm actually surprised that they made a comeback. Now, I worked at Little Caesars, and the one thing that they do differently is how they make their pizzas. Now, as far as delivery drivers go, Little Caesars did it more like Domino's. They had CSRs and they had delivery drivers. They didn't have a kitchen because they didn't have dine-in. They did have hot and ready. They still had hot and ready back when I worked there, which was literally just cook a bunch of pepperoni and cheese pizzas and then just cut them up, put them in the hot and ready bin, and people would come and buy them. So they were doing hot and ready when I worked there. I worked there in, I think it was 2007 when I worked there. I think it was 2008 they quit doing delivery at the Little Caesars where I worked. Because I remember they laid everybody off. They just laid off all the drivers and they just stopped doing delivery. They just didn't do delivery anymore. So I remember I didn't stay there long enough for that. I worked there for like a couple of weeks and then I quit. But the way Little Caesars did it was they hired all the delivery drivers. Delivery drivers were also supervisors. So instead of having, you had CSRs and then you had pizza drivers, but you also had supervisors. So they were shift leads. So all of the pizza drivers were also shift leads. So you could run the register. I don't know why they did it that way. But it was frustrating because it was always, you'd have 3 pizza drivers on shift at the same time who were all quote unquote shift lead, and nobody was in charge. Nobody knew who was in charge. What was the chain of command? So anytime someone would ask for the manager, it was always like, it ain't me, when in reality it probably was. I hated working at Little Caesars. Now let's talk about how they make pizzas. All 4 of these places make pizzas differently. Domino's, Little Caesars, Papa John's, all 3 make pizzas mostly the same. The biggest difference is, like I said, Papa John's puts the cheese on top of the toppings, which is gross. You don't do that. The toppings go on top of the cheese. The cheese goes on the sauce and then toppings. You have to have the cheese separate the toppings from the sauce. You don't want to put pepperonis on the sauce. That's so stinking gross. It's so stinking gross. I can't stand that they do that. I cannot believe that they do that. I'll check my phone real quick. Okay. So anyways, let's talk about how they make pizzas. Again, this has probably changed since then. Pizza Hut, they have frozen dough. Pizza Hut takes a frozen dough, and what they do is they take a pan, and it doesn't matter what pizza it is. It doesn't matter if it's pan pizza. It doesn't matter if it's hand-tossed pizza. They make them both basically the same. You take the pizza, and what you do is you take a pan, a metal pan, a cast iron pan, and you squirt oil into the pan and you smooth it out, and then you put the dough on top of the oil, and then you take a can of cooking spray and you spray the edges of the pizza dough, and then you put a lid on top of it. Depending on if it's a pan pizza or if it's the rising crust, what do they call it? Hand tossed. If it's hand tossed, you put it in a proofer and it'll proof it. If it's pan pizza, you just put it in the freezer and you just wait for it. If I remember correctly, I could be getting those backwards, but they were both basically prepared the same. It was just one of them you put in a proof. I think it was the hand toss you put in the proofer because it had to rise, whereas the pan pizza. No, I think the pan pizzas had to rise too. Now I don't remember. Anyways, it doesn't matter. That was the biggest thing, is their pizzas are super, super greasy. That's the point of it. Even their thin crust pizzas, they put them on greasy pans and spray them with a cooking spray. So they're like extra greasy. Domino's doesn't do that. Domino's doesn't put their pizzas in a pan. Pizza Hut cooks everything in a pan, whether it's a pan pizza, a hand-tossed pizza, or a thin crust pizza. They cook it all in a pan. Even the stuffed crust, they cook it all in a pan. Domino's cooks everything on a sheet. Papa John's and Little Caesars cook everything on a sheet, just like Domino's does. So Pizza Hut's the only one that put everything on a pan. Now, if I remember correctly, again, this was several years ago, Pizza Hut also cooked their breads. They had square pans for breadsticks. If I remember correctly, Domino's had square pans for their bread, for their cheesy bread. They cooked everything else on the sheets. If I remember correctly, I could be remembering wrong, but I worked at a lot of different Pizza Huts. I worked at a lot of different Domino's. I worked at the one Papa John's and the one Little Caesars, but I worked at a lot of Pizza Huts and a lot of Little Caesars over the years. So I worked at a lot of different pizza places. Then there was Domino's. The way Domino's did it was they took a ball of dough, fresh dough. They would take the dough that they made. The prep part of the prep work was actually making dough. You had a big machine and you would mix the dough, hand-tossed dough. You would mix the dough and you would put it on cornmeal. God, I couldn't remember the word. You would flatten it out with your hands. You would just, I still remember how to do it. I could still hand toss pizza if I went back to work there. You put your fingers like this, and then you just press down, and then you turn it and you press, and you turn it and you press, and you do that until you have a circle, and then you just sort of spread it out. Once it's spread out, you put the sauce on there. With the ladle, you swirl it around, Then you take the cup of cheese and you sprinkle it on and you spread it around. Yes, you use your hands, but you wash your hands in between everything, so your hands are clean. Don't worry about that. And then, so then you would put the toppings on top. Now you would just reach in with your hand. You were wearing gloves. If you were doing it right, you would be wearing gloves anyways. You'd grab the toppings and you'd sprinkle them on the pizza. On a screen, it was a pizza screen. Then you would stick it in the oven. It would come out halfway through the oven. They would open the lid and they would take this little poker and they would go in and pop the bubbles because the pizza dough would bubble. So you have to pop the bubbles and then the dough would come out on the other side and you would have a clean pizza. You would take the pizza, you take the pizza cutter, you cut the pizza into little triangles, unless it was a thin crust. They did thin crust a little bit differently. We'll talk about that. And then you would cut it up, put it in the box, put the box in the bag. The delivery driver would take it, check themselves out, head out the door. Now, actually, you didn't put it in the box, or in the bag. The driver would put it in the bag. You didn't do that for them. Whoever was prepping the boxes. So that's how Domino's did it. Papa John's and Little Caesars, I didn't work out long enough for me to be able to comment how they cooked their pizzas. I do remember Papa John's used fresh dough. Little Caesars used frozen dough. So Pizza Hut and Little Caesars both use frozen dough. Papa John's and Domino's both use fresh dough. That much I remember. Now, Little Caesars had a biscuit. It was a little biscuit that came, it was about this big. They put it in a machine and the machine would roll it out. And they would turn the biscuit into a sheet of pizza dough. Basically is how Little Caesars did it. Papa John's and Domino's did it the exact same way. They took a ball of dough, they pressed it down, and then they put the toppings on it, and then throw it in the oven. So Papa John's and Domino's, they cook their pizzas the exact same way, except for who put the cheese on top. That was gross. Let's not talk about that anymore. I'm going to puke thinking about it. I gag thinking about it. It's so gross. I can't eat Papa John's because of that. Ew, it is so gross. If you eat Papa John's, I'm sorry. I don't know who hurt you, but please don't eat Papa John's. Don't eat Papa John's pizza. It's gross. Okay. What else was different between the different pizza places? Well, let's talk about computer systems. Pizza Hut used the same computer system every restaurant. It was the same computer system. Didn't matter if it was in Kansas, if it was in a big city. Didn't matter if it was in a Pizza Hut Express, in a gas station. I worked at all of them. They all had the same computer system. It was a DOS-based command line computer system, and it was annoying. It was frustrating. It was old school, and they never updated it. Domino's switched from a command line to a touchscreen-based system, which was heavenly, by the way. And they did that while I was working there. They called it Domino's Pulse. It was called Domino's Pulse. It was a touchscreen-based system that also had GPS capabilities. This was before everybody had smartphones, so GPS was either built into your car. You had a TomTom, or it was you had to get the coordinates in the map from the system. Papa John's and Little Caesars used outdated systems like Pizza Hut did. That's what I remember. Now remember, this was the time I worked there. I don't know what it's like today. I don't know. They could be using touchscreen systems today. I don't know. I don't know what it's like at Pizza Hut today. But not every Domino's had the touchscreen system. Some Domino's had the older system. Some Domino's had an even older system. It just depended on which Domino's you were at. Now, they're all franchise. Pizza Hut. Not all Pizza Huts are franchise. There's a lot of corporate Pizza Huts. There are no corporate Domino's. All Domino's are franchise. So that was the other difference. If I'm not mistaken, corporate Pizza Huts all had the latest menu software, whereas franchises, it was up to the individual franchisee, just like it was at Domino's. I worked at a Domino's that had Pulse. I left there, and then I went to work for a Domino's that didn't have Pulse, and it was like going back to the Stone Age. It was awful. I was like, when are we going to get Pulse? When are we going to get Pulse? And the owner of the store was like, I'm working on it. I'm trying to get it. I'm excited for it. But don't worry, I'm going to get it. He never got it while I was working there. So I left and went to work at a Pizza Hut. I went to work from Domino's to Pizza Hut. I bounced around a lot. So, uniforms. Pizza Hut gives you a uniform. Domino's gives you a uniform. Papa John's gives you a uniform. Little Caesars gives you a uniform. They all basically give you the same uniform. It's a shirt. You're supposed to wear pants, and then you're supposed to wear restaurant quality shoes, which are non-slick shoes, so that you don't slip, which would just be basically your black restaurant shoes. You know, your restaurant shoes. You know what those look like. Domino's required khaki pants, if I remember correctly. Again, this is several years ago, so it may have changed, or I could be remembering wrong. Domino's and Domino's and Papa John's both required khaki pants. Little Caesars is the only place that I remember wearing jeans. I don't remember if it was okay to wear jeans, but I wore jeans to Little Caesars. So I don't know if it was a matter of it was okay, or if it was a matter of I didn't have any slacks at the time and they let me wear jeans just because they needed me to get started. I don't remember. I didn't work at Little Caesars very long. Actually, okay, if I'm being honest, I only worked one shift at Little Caesars and I didn't finish the shift. So it could have just been that they didn't care because I was new. I don't know. I don't remember. But I do remember working at Little Caesars and I remember they let me wear jeans. Maybe it was just because it was that one day. I don't know. But Pizza Hut was the only one that didn't wear khaki pants. Pizza Hut, you had to wear black slack pants. They didn't want you to wear khaki pants. You had to wear black slacks. Pizza Hut had a red and black shirt for pizza drivers, and then they had a black shirt for cooks. So if you wore the black shirt, you were a cook. If you wore the red and black shirt, you were either a pizza driver, or they made the waitresses wear the red and black shirts as well. CSRs wore the black shirt or the red shirt. It didn't matter. CSRs could wear either shirt. I don't know why that was. If I remember correctly, they all let you wear a hat. Pizza Hut gave you a hat. Domino's gave you a hat. Little Caesars and Papa John's all gave you a hat to wear. So the standard uniform was shirt, pants, hat, shoes. Pizza Hut also gave you an apron. Pizza Hut was the only one that gave you an apron. The apron was, one, to protect you from splashback from doing the dishes because you were going to get grease. The water was very greasy and they didn't want you to get covered in smelly, greasy water. So you would take the apron off when you went on deliveries, and then you would put the apron back on when you got into the store. That's what you were supposed to do, but I kept my apron on because I kept my tip money down in the pockets of the apron because I had pockets, and that's where I kept my money. So I wore the dirty apron even out on deliveries, even though I wasn't supposed to. But I was dating the boss, so she was okay with it. That's a whole other story. Yes, I was dating my supervisor at Pizza Hut. I left Pizza Hut, went to work for Domino's, moved to another city in another state, went to work for another Domino's where I was dating the supervisor there until we broke up, and then I left Pizza. I left Domino's because we broke up. I left Domino's and went to work for Pizza Hut to get away from her. And yeah, it worked. So it happened. I wasn't dating either of these women for very long. I'll tell you that right now. But it doesn't matter. You don't really want to date your boss. It's not a good thing. I'll tell you that right now. All right, so that's pretty much my story. I haven't worked at a pizza place since 2015. The last one I worked at was a Domino's in Gainesville, Texas. I worked at a Domino's on, I don't remember what road it was on, but I worked at a Domino's in Gainesville, Texas. So there you go. That's my experience working in the pizza industry. When I left the pizza business, I went to college and I got myself an education. I earned most of a bachelor's degree. I never finished, but I got most of a bachelor's degree, 12 credits away. And I studied broadcasting and journalism, and I went to go work for a newspaper and then a television station, and then I've done a little bit of everything in that business since. So yeah, it worked out for me. But that's my experience working in the pizza industry. Let me know what your experience was like. Let me know. Do they still put the toppings on top of the cheese? The cheese on top of the toppings at Papa John's? If they do, ew, grody. It's icky, nasty, 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 gross. Maybe they learned their lesson and now they put the cheese down on the sauce and then put the toppings on top. I don't know. Maybe they changed. Let me know. What's it like working at a Pizza Hut today? Do they still use frozen dough? I bet you they do. I bet you they still use frozen dough at Pizza Hut. All right, what does Domino's do these days? Are they using frozen dough or are they still doing fresh dough? Because I know they've got like that Brooklyn style crust. I can't imagine that that's a fresh pizza crust. That's got to be a frozen pizza, a prepared pizza crust. It's got to be. Unless it's just the hand-tossed dough and they just call it Brooklyn style. I don't know. I don't work there. All right, let me know. What do you think? What was it like working for a pizza place for you? Do you still work at a pizza place? Do you have memories of working at pizza? Were you a driver? Were you a CSR? Were you a cook? Were you a waitress at a Pizza Hut? I would love to know. Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and maybe leave a thumbs up or two. And don't forget, if you want to give me money, you can go to patreon.com/StephanieBreen. Stay cool.